You're muted, Jim, or frozen.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. I was saying, I'll start again quickly. We have an action-packed agenda and a lot to cover, and we are pleased to be partnering with Encore.org and are very excited about the fact that over 400 of people have registered, and we can see people are still checking in. Recent Encore Network programs have covered the pandemic pivot with our membership and racial justice and 50+ employment. Today's topic is very personal for me, as I've been involved over the years with young people and older generations, young and old generations, inspiring and educating each other. There are many examples of younger and older generations inspiring and educating each other, but what we need in society is to make collaborating across generations a way of life. Today's panel is a step along that journey. We're fortunate to have a great multi-generational perspective from our panel on what is working, and we're really fortunate to have all of you who can give us your ideas and your thoughts about action we can all take to capitalize on this collective knowledge. We only have an hour together, so we'll start shortly with a panel moderated by Eunice Nichols, Vice President of Encore.org. We'll take some time for questions from you, which we want you to put into the chat. We'll move to small group sessions where you can share your reaction to the panel, as well as actions you think will be helpful in moving to a new societal form of intergenerational collaboration, and then conclude with a brief wrap-up. First, just a few housekeeping items. You'll be on mute, like I was, but you'll be on mute until we get to the small group breakout session. Paula Hart, Encore Network ED, and Anshul Dar, you see at the top of the screen, are also with us, who have been very involved in pulling this together, and you'll hear from them later on. Please use the chat box to share your reflections, questions, comments, and commitments based on today's discussion. There will be a public recording of this session, which will be posted on the Encore Network website. So before we get started, Paula, let's get a sense of who's in the room by having you post a poll. So you can see the one question with 3 options. Please submit your answers right now, please. Paula, let us know when you think we've got a number of responses.
We're going to just give people a few more minutes. We're at about 88% have voted. So thanks for everybody who has. We still have some people who are joining us. And so we'll give you a minute to fill that out. All right, well, let's wrap this polling up and I'll share the results with you.
Okay, looks like there's been some involvement. Eunice, we'll turn it over to you in the panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jim. I'm so pleased that we're co-hosting this panel discussion with the Encore Network. For those of you who don't know me, I actually consider myself to be somebody who grew up in the Encore movement. I was 25 when I first heard Encore.org founder Mark Friedman speak about how older generations can make a difference in the lives of young people. And as the child of Chinese immigrants, this was my truth. I was raised in an intergenerational household My grandparents were my after-school program, and Mark's ideas just made sense, and I wanted to be part of it. So just 3 years out of college, I left my corporate job to run Experience Core Bay Area, which was then a fledgling program of Encore, which was connecting adults over 50 as tutors and mentors to children who are falling through the cracks in public schools. And from there, I never looked back. And so as a result, I've been lucky to spend 2 decades, nearly my whole adult life, at the forefront of the Encore movement. And I've been deeply shaped by the people surrounding me, many who are making the most significant contributions of their lives after 50, including a number of you in this virtual room with us. So I'm now just 4.5 years shy of 50 myself. But instead of dreading these midlife decades like so many of my peers, I feel a growing sense of possibility, excited for what I might do in another decade or 2 or even 3. And how could I not? It's the best kind of virtuous cycle to be a young person surrounded by the support, creativity, and inspiration of elders, who then grows into an elder who reflexively cares about making the world a better place for and with young people. At Encore.org, the nonprofit I work with, we call it living and leading gen to gen, or generation to generation. And it's why we're so committed to bringing older and younger generations together to forge bonds, solve problems, and bridge divides. So for those of you who know a little bit about the work of Encore, we do that by elevating new ideas and diverse voices that shift the dominant public narrative from one of generational war, that's something we hear a lot about in the media, to one of generational solidarity. And we also do it by supporting social innovators and community builders who are bringing generations together to solve some of society's greatest problems. The Encore Network and many of the folks on this call today are so valuable in the work that we do in this field. So today, it's a real privilege to share the stage, the virtual stage, with both Encore and Encore Network leaders from 3 different generations. We have Gabby Lee, who's a junior at Stanford University, who founded Virtual Companions, a national nonprofit working to reduce loneliness. We have Shayna Pittman-Frank, who's a member of Gen X. She's the Director of Community Engagement at Senior Advocates for Generational Equity, also known as SAGE, based in Portland, Oregon. And we have Dr. Kitty Oliver, who's a baby boomer, an oral historian, an author, a singer, an Encore Public Voices Fellow from South Florida, who founded the Race and Change Oral Histories Archive. Gabby, Shayna, and Kitty come from very different walks of life, but they share a common belief in the tremendous assets of both our aging population and younger generations. Each of them have recently taken intentional steps to engage a growing number of young people in their Encore work because they know intergenerational solutions are uniquely suited to help them deepen their impact in the community. We have so much to learn from them, so let's get to it. I'm going to start off by actually asking each of them to do a more personal introduction of themselves, because there's no introduction I could give that would adequately share the heart that each of them bring to their work. So Gabby, I'm going to start with you and ask you, what's one thing we should know about you that will help ground us in who you are and why you do what you do?
Thank you. And first off, thank you so much for inviting me to join you guys on this panel. I feel like I have so much learning to do and might be able to learn more from you all than I can share. But yeah, I'm super happy to be here. And I guess going to your question of what grounds me in what I do, I truly believe in the power of listening to the stories of people who are often overlooked, and in using that power to build inclusive communities and spaces for connection and healing. And I think that that value of storytelling and community building is what grounds my work with Virtual Companions, which is the nonprofit that I founded earlier in the pandemic to combat loneliness and ageism, as well as my work with Stanford Synapse, which is a brain injury support group, and with the Presence 5 team, where I use research and patient stories to address anti-racism in medical education.
Wonderful. Thanks for kicking us off, Gabby. Over to you, Shayna. What should we know about you that will help us ground ourselves in who you are and what you do?
Thanks for having me. I would say it's an interesting question. It's interesting to try to pin it down. But I would say my relationships, I too was very connected to my grandparents growing up, and I have a very strong sense of my matrilineal upbringing and the strong women in my life. And they as people and with wants and needs and passions as they get older. And I've had a lot of older adults as friends throughout the course of my life. And so the blurring of generations and relationships and friendships has always been kind of strong for me. And really that seeing that line, that generational line, and planting that seed into my daughter, it just has this strength of a continuum that no matter what work I'm doing in the world, it feels like everything I do is not just on behalf of her, it's on behalf of my grandmother and all of us. So I think that just is this thread that's strong with me.
That's beautiful. Such a perfect segue over to you, Kitty. Would love to hear your response to this question too.
Well, thank you for having me here too. I grew up in racial segregation in the South, and I came of age with integration, and I learned to live and thrive in a world of diverse cultures, and how other people have been negotiating that over the decades has been at the core of the work I've been doing. I became a journalist and a creative writer, but I really discovered my voice with oral history. And over the past 2 decades, I've collected over 100 life histories of people across cultures in my generation, and also brought younger people into this conversation on race and culture and ethnicity and differences, so that they could see that history making is an ongoing process and that they are a part of it too. And the work has just been phenomenal, and seeing how it's grown and expanded, and how my network across generations has expanded as a result of something called history.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Gabby, Shana, and Kitty. I'd love to move us over to a question that gets at your thoughts on why it's so important to engage young people in particular in the Encore movement, which has traditionally been really focused on an audience of people 50 plus. Like I mentioned, I joined the Encore movement as a young person, but the real focus was on leveraging the talents and skills of people 50 and older to help in all kinds of challenges in society. So I feel like there's a little bit of a sea change happening right now. Shana, not long ago, SAGE decided to intentionally bring young people into its work. Love for you to share why that is and what steps you took to make that happen.
Sure. So for us, our mission is to, and sorry, I'm at a neighbor's, there's background noise. We've had a big storm, and so they're working with a generator. SAGE's mission is inherently about making the world better so future generations can thrive by activating adults 50 plus. And so all of the work that we are doing is to work on behalf of future generations. And it was very evident right away that how can we advocate on behalf of future generations if we're not asking what future generations want or need to thrive. So we, from the outset, we created a leadership advisory board of young people to kind of advise SAGE on the issues that we decided to advocate on behalf and the work that we wanted to do. And so having those young advisors was just inherent in the work that we do. But along the way, we have seen that young people have just been interested in the work that we do and the issues that we care about. And so there's been this interesting organic process of young people getting involved in our work. So when we're working on climate change issues or advocating for education, we've just been finding partners come out of the woodwork and wanting to do intergenerational work. And without even calling it intergenerational work, young people have really cared about our mission and giving forward to future generations. So I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of distractions suddenly going on.
No, I know you're dealing with weather and other natural disasters over there. I think I heard you say it once, Shana, as kind of young people went from being adjacent to really central to your work. And I find that very inspiring. Wanted to just make one comment for those in the audience. If, as Shayna, Gabby, and Kitty are sharing their thoughts, feel free to put in any follow-up questions that you want in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Okay, Kitty, I'd love to hear, you're really rooted in oral histories, and for most of us who, where that isn't our area of expertise, I think our traditional understanding of that is that elders kind of record stories to preserve and pass down memories to younger generations. Is there actually a more active role for young people to play beyond being recipients or learners of history? And how do you think about that?
Absolutely. I found that the oral history process can be a way of opening the door to deeper discussions about social justice issues by engaging people at the heart, either to get them started in doing work you may want to do, or to keep them engaged and keep them going. Now, I was interested specifically in race and ethnic relations experiences across cultures and unheard voices, but this process is used in around other issues, health and wellness, environmental concerns, grassroots organizing, community planning and development. But my intention was to share the stories that I collected as widely as possible publicly and involve younger people. So I started where I was then. At the time, I was a part-time college professor, and I created a community-focused race and change project. And that began with 12 students. And it grew eventually as I moved out and started to work independently to over 100 college-age students and community participants. And I started by engaging them and just listening to the audio recordings or reading the transcripts of some of the stories of elders from cultures that were different from their own, and looking actively for experiences that resonated with them, and then writing their own stories, incorporating these elder narratives, memories into the reflections on their experiences with race. And lo and behold, it mushroomed from there, because we had an event where the elders, some of them came and were able to interact with the young people who had heard their stories, and there was excitement on both parts. But then the younger people's writings were so profound that we found a way to showcase them in a collection of essays, and they became first-time published authors as a result of that intergenerational exchange. Then came a web radio podcast of their stories and the stories of elders, and interviews with others, TV series segment on younger generation perspectives, and then immigrant teenagers. I began collecting their stories, and they did podcasts, and they were motivated to be involved because they knew their stories were going to be heard and shared. Now, some of the students eventually became oral historians working in culturally diverse communities. And overall, the process has become a social justice instrument that can help to build coalitions across cultures and generations.
That's beautiful. I also feel like it ties to something Shayna said earlier about how the work she does can't be done without invoking both her grandmother as well as the future for her children, and helping young people see how we're all interconnected is so critical. Gabby, you're our resident Gen Z, and as a current college student, I'd love to get a sense for what you think the level of interest is in your peers to engage with older generations, and what motivates you specifically to connect with and care about people who are quite a few generations older than you.
Yeah, and I will only be speaking to my experience and not all of Gen Z, but yeah, I think there are two sort of like general trends that I've been noticing in my conversations with my peers. I think one is that still there is a significant number of youth who might not really think much about engaging with older adults outside of their immediate family members or with their professors. And in some of those conversations, I can kind of see there are some still like deep-seated perceptions of divisions or misconceptions that people might have against the older generation. But what I've noticed as I've become more involved in the Encore movement and in building virtual companions this past year, as I've kind of shared what I've learned and the conversations I've been able to have with people in this space, a lot of people are actually very interested and excited and curious to learn more. One of the questions that I ask people who fill out like the sign up form on the Virtual Companions page is like, what brings you here? Like, why are you interested? And some of the stories there are like, I'm personally just very inspired by. That a lot of people do have like an overwhelming amount of compassion and desire to learn and connect with people outside of their immediate family. So I do think that this kind of presents a great opportunity to reach across generational lines and engage more youth because they're interested. And I think the other thing that I've noticed more in this pandemic is that many young people are reaching across to engage and support older generations, like so many different helping hands groups, high school clubs, youth just assembling together, whether it's to deliver groceries or give calls or just connect with their older neighbors. And I truly do believe that everyone is coming from a place of compassion and wanting to help in any way. But one thing that I've like noticed and sort of fear is that this compassion might also be coming from a place of an assumption of need of older generations. And so this compassionate ageism is still a perception that can be damaging, and it does still perpetuate the view that older adults might be more vulnerable or more frail, and the wanting to help isn't coming from a place of these people are elders and have so much wisdom and more to give, and that's why we want to be helping. So I think going forward, what is needed more than ever is for young people to learn how to responsibly reflect on how we engage with older adults, and learn more about how to do that properly. And I think that's where organizations like Encore, Sage, and like all of the work that you guys are doing in extending mentorship and opportunities to kind of teach youth and younger adults how to do that responsibly and effectively.
Thanks, Gabby. I really appreciate that perspective. And as I think about that, I feel like there are probably a lot of questions in the audience about kind of practically how do we do some of that. And so I want to start with you, Kitty, and just ask, what advice do you have for individuals or organizations who are just starting to think about engaging young people? Do you have any tips for them?
Well, I have a mantra: invite, involve, and inspire. Those are three things I could offer. Getting involved with the maybe local colleges and universities could be a good start for some people, because often there are courses or even service learning experiences where some of the resources you have as an individual or an organization could be useful for students to work on anything from papers to projects to actually to do presentations for student groups so that they learn about what you're doing and in turn see how it relates to what they're learning, and it can grow from there. For example, I got involved with a community planning and housing project that was re-envisioning a Black neighborhood, and we brought young people in to record some of the stories in that community and also to work on design projects, and then had a gathering bringing them together around those stories and possibilities, and involving some of the newer groups in your community for outreach. A simple thing is a community gathering to celebrate or present cultural stories or experiences from different generational perspectives or around a topic of interest where they can interact afterwards. The Farm Workers Association here in Florida invited me to create a gathering of that type because they had African American, Haitian, and Latinx residents who had not been meeting together around some of the issues they wanted to pursue. So just that storytelling event brought them in for the first time to begin to meet each other and then start to work on issues. And finally, with the inspiring, I found that with the young people that I work for, they're very product oriented, as I am too. So getting involvement in social media or doing guest blog posts if you've got that platform, or involved in a newsletter or a podcast, participants, or even starting one, or doing presentations that they help to develop where there are different generational perspectives, keeps them engaged in wanting to do more and more with the stories or with the work that you are doing. So invite, involve, and inspire.
Appreciate that, Kitty, and just the importance of being where young people hang out. I actually had been dragging my feet on getting onto social media until during March for Our Lives, I met an 80-year-old woman who got on Twitter for the first time in order to be where people were having these conversations, including intergenerationally. And I thought, oh my goodness, I need to get on this too. So I want to skip over to you, Shana, and ask what tips or advice you have for people who are just starting to think about engaging young people, or those who have already done it but want to take that engagement deeper.
Well, I think one way you can start, either at the individual or the organizational level, in engaging young people is really looking for shared passion. I think whether I've been wanting to connect with older or younger people, when you find people who have shared passions through different kinds of organizations, even if that organization looks like it's not for you, it's really worth it to reach out to show that you're invested in the same thing. So it could be climate change, it could be the education system. With SAGE, we've found work with younger or more younger driven organizations and younger partners through our climate change and climate education work, as well as racial equity around within the education system. And so I think when we find the shared passion, we find other people of different ages who care about the same things. So that I find can be helpful for both organizations and individuals. And as Gabby mentioned, young people are out there. And I find that the appetite to connect across generations is there. I find one of the more difficult populations to connect for me are actually my peers of parents of young children. And that's where I think, because people are busy and they're in the middle of parenting and working and going from their day to day, that they're not really stepping out sometimes, and they feel like they don't have time, instead of realizing that they could be a part of an intergenerational community that really would help them as well as they can help. So that's kind of one of my passions, is to really connect with more people around my age in their early 40s in the intergenerational movement. And last, I think that in moving forward with building our intergenerational community, just keeping in mind that we're all connected, and the issues we care about, we're interconnected, and it's not just about me helping you or you helping me, it's we're helping each other. And so for SAGE and for me personally, I also really feel like our joint advocacy around issues we all care about moving forward is another way that we can really work together. So whether it's advocating for Medicaid and enlisting younger people to understand Medicaid more so, or Medicare more so, and see how it will affect them in the future, or to enlist older generations to advocate on issues around education. That's another opportunity I really feel like we can make a lot of headway. So I'm excited about that too.
That's great, Shana. And I think that gets at a question that Mike had put in the chat box about just how we can continue to bridge divides in this sort of very fraught climate, and how different generations can work together, whether it be around things like climate change, systemic racism, classism, and things like that. Happy to hear more thoughts from the rest of you on that, but I also want to toss over a question to Gabby about tips or advice you might have, but also Patricia asked in the chat box how people like her can get more involved in these programs without leaving their homes during this time. I feel like you are uniquely situated to answer that question, and then how that ties to in real life activities when COVID eases down. So tips and or advice.
For sure. So I actually pretty recently stumbled across this intergenerational movement. Like I think it's been almost a year now. Crazy to think that it's already been a year, but that was something that I hadn't really heard much about in high school or in college even, and it was really by chance. So I think that started with me just reaching out to the assisted living place that my grandma used to live at after her last year. And I was just learning more about how like there seems to be a need for more just engagement and connection with some of the older adults living there. And as I was thinking about like, okay, so like how, like what is the best way to kind of go about this and address this issue of loneliness? And then that's where I realized by looking at other organizations and just like what research says also is it's all pointing towards the power of intergenerational connections. And so that was kind of the start. And then I started digging deeper and was able to form virtual companions as a product of that. I think kind of adding on to Kitty's mantra, I would like to add humble inquiry. I think is something that has grounded this journey. Just knowing that I have so much more to learn and wanting to see what are the ways that I can learn from other community leaders in this space and incorporate that in my own journey to like address a certain problem. So in building virtual companions, it's a virtual intergenerational community. And so that's where I think going back to the question that someone asked in the chat, because it's completely virtual, built out of this pandemic, trying to figure out a way to connect people of different generations in a safe virtual manner that's also accessible. So whether it's through letter writing or putting concerts together, or getting together on a Zoom or phone call to create crafts to send out to other communities. Like recently we had this huge workshop with over 100 participants, and we were able to send out crafts that people, I think the people that attended were from age 7 to age like 98.
Wow.
So it was just a really cool community to all be on Zoom together and then make these cards and crafts that we ended up delivering to healthcare workers, hospitalized children, and older adult communities. So yeah, I think, going back to the original question of how to engage more youth, I think just thinking about what are the Gen Z tools and spaces and how to take advantage of that. So I think tools, definitely like thinking about social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, newsletters, mailing lists, and then spaces. I think the biggest space that a lot of Gen Zers are affiliated with are schools and institutions. And so finding ways to present your organization as a mentorship opportunity or learning experience for youth could be a good way. I know personally that at my school, they have I think they call it like cardinal organization. So a lot of nonprofits can apply to be a part of this list that basically Stanford would kind of try to, connect students with opportunities to help and learn in the nonprofit space or in other service-oriented spaces, whether it's as a intern or just as an employee for like a quarter or a summer. And then Stanford would provide like some grants or opportunities for to support the student as they help out an organization and learn from the mentors there. Yeah, so I think framing your work as like, what are the learning opportunities or mentorship or career building skills that a student can gain out of that. And then maybe supplementing that with like a coffee chat or an opportunity for a student to meet the people behind, like meet you and the people behind your work, because I think one conversation can really go a long way once that connection is made. So yeah,
Great, Gabby.
Tools and spaces.
Wonderful. I could talk to the three of you all day. I think the audience could probably listen to you all day, but sadly we are short on time and we want to make sure you have time to move into some breakout groups to discuss what you've learned. I do want to just crowdsource via chat. One person, Christine, had asked just for ideas on ways to partner with local school districts to provide intergenerational opportunities to benefit assisted living communities. So if you work in that space, I can do a shout out to AARP Experience Corps. Put that in the chat box for Christine. But mostly I want to thank our panelists for this enlightening discussion on how to engage more young people in the Encore movement. In fact, an entire generation of young people, as Gabby is reminding us, are being shaped by COVID-19 and by who we become as a society when we emerge from this season of challenge. So I think we all believe this is the moment to help younger and older generations band together, many for the very first time, to form a web of support around one another and to solve problems together. The sustainability of our work requires a bold commitment to collaborating across generations. Plus, I think most of us can attest to the fact that it just makes it a lot more fun. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Emily, and you'll move us through the rest of the event.
Great. Thank you so much, Eunice. And thank you to these amazing panelists. They have awesome ideas, and we know you all do too. You're joining with a lot of experience. And so we'd love to hear more and connect you all to learn a little more from each other. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes in breakouts. And here is what we'd like you to talk about. First, your small group, just in quick couple of seconds, please share your name and your organization. We'd love to help connect you to each other. So take this opportunity to meet new people. We'd love to hear from each person in the group in just about a minute or so per person. What struck you most from the panelists? And more importantly, we'd love to hear your ideas on what we can do together to move intergenerational work forward. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Try and be specific, as many action items as you can come out of, that's what we're looking to hear. So when we return, we'll utilize the chat box again to hear some ideas that surfaced in the breakouts. So again, I'll post those questions in the chat box to reference, but again, very brief introductions, any aha moments, anything that struck you from our panelists, and then your specific ideas on how we can move this work forward. So enjoy. Well, you don't need to do a thing. You will automatically be sent to your breakouts, and we'll bring you back together at about 10:02. So enjoy.
So we're here.
All right, people are moving into their breakout rooms. For some folks who are not on video, or maybe are just by phone, I'm not sure if you'll be able to move into a breakout room. If you're here in the main room and want to have a chat with those of us who are here, we're happy to do that. Just unmute yourself and speak up. But if not, you'll just get to hear Kitty, Gabby, Paula, and myself chit chat with one another.
I actually joined late because I had to have my vaccination, and there was a long line because of the snow. And so I missed everything, so I would like to hear what you've been talking about.
So much wisdom. And I actually can't tell who's speaking. Can you tell me your name?
Nancy Pasternak.
Oh, Nancy. Hello. How are you?
Hi,
Well,
great.
this is a little known secret for anybody. I didn't want to advertise this, but for anybody who didn't move into a breakout room, you get the benefit of Gabby and Kitty's direct experience. So we might not, Nancy, cover ground before, but I do feel like there's a lot that we could have gone into more. And so Kitty and Gabby, if you're up for it, maybe we'll just have a little further discussion. Does that work for you?
Yeah, what now, do you use Rotaractors and RILA people from Rotary? Gabby, have you heard of that?
The
No.
Rotary?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've actually interacted with the Rotary affiliated with Peninsula Healthcare District.
I feel like, Gabby, you've actually done quite a bit around building partnerships to bring in both older adults and young people. Maybe it's worth just spending a couple minutes on how you've done that. And then Kitty, you've done so much work bringing older and younger generations together. I'd be curious if you have used any partnerships or connected with local organizations to make that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Sure. So I've engaged I think part of this is really cool. Like in the beginning, it starts off by you just kind of throwing cold emails out at people because you have similar missions or have an idea of how to collaborate. But then once you have something going, then you have people contacting you and then it becomes really exciting. So I've definitely worked with a few like high school and college groups who might like normally do some sort of volunteering or engaging with older adults like in person, and then they now don't really have the tools or a platform to do it safely virtually. And so I think that's where I was able to like build some partnerships and offer myself as a resource. And then with older generations, I think one thing, big thank you to Eunice and Encore for some of the connections there. And then also through Stanford's Haas Center for Public Service, I've been able to connect with some, whether it's like assisted living centers or other organizations that engage mostly older adults who also want to volunteer. Yeah.
That's great. How about you,
So
Kitty?
is there, you know, mentoring is not necessarily easy for some people, and I'm wondering if there's any, do you do any training or do you have any questionnaires that you put out, or just to make sure that people are have the right motivation and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's actually, you like hit the nail right on its head. Something I've been thinking about more, especially as I want to work with more younger generations, like high schoolers maybe, who want to work in this space as well. So something that we're in the process of creating is sort of like a chapter curriculum onboarding system where we just kind of share first, just like the main principles that we believe help for ethical and responsible service and just interacting with people of different generations to make sure we do create an inclusive space. And then a lot of that wisdom has come from like personal experience, trial and error, and then also just talking to a lot of leaders who've already done it before. And so I think that that's almost like an onboarding in the beginning. And then for people who are actually like involved in the Virtual Companions project, we do also have a training there.
Mm-hmm.
What is your project?
So it's a virtual intergenerational organization that tries to connect people to combat loneliness and also ageism. And we do that through conversations, service, and the arts.
Nancy, I put a link to that in the chat box, as well as another organization, Big and Mini, that does virtual work right now during the pandemic. Maybe, Kitty, we can hear a little bit from you. We just have a couple minutes left before folks come back.
Well, I'll address it to Nancy. My approach and work is a bit broader because I'm dealing with the use of oral histories and stories, and as a way of bringing people together across races and cultures, as well as an intergenerational enterprise. So I talk about partnering with educational institutions, but not so much the schools per se, as groups that might be working with school age younger people. They may be children, teenagers, or college students or whatever, and finding ways that you can go in and share the stories of your organization and the work that you're doing, and find younger people who might want to come and do projects on the work, or get involved in some way as a learning experience, but also using cultural stories as a way of bringing different parts of the community together in events where the sharing of the stories across generations creates a coalition that can allow the communities to begin to work on some larger issues.
Where do you find people that will talk about their cultural stories?
Well, one way of doing it is start maybe by identifying people who might be new to the community, and it becomes a learning experience of understanding that group and that culture and that community in terms of their history and what brought them to the area, and then sharing stories in a community gathering about how they came to the area and how their culture and family operate and how the generations interact with each other. So you're easing into it by inviting some aspects of your community, maybe who haven't been a part of it before, to come in and be a part and share with the rest of the community. And that's an easy way to start.
That's great, Kitty. I also feel like there so often we think that we don't know where to find somebody of another generation, and it's in part because our society has so segregated people into various, even physical buildings, and yet often an older or younger population is actually right next door. We just don't see them, and that could be a senior center that's located near an elementary school. It could be your neighbor that you've just never even looked over to say hello to. And it's, I think, Kitty, your mantra that's just to invite people into that conversation. It doesn't need to be a big barrier. Yeah. I think folks are going to be rejoining us soon. We might have time for one last comment or question.
Thanks.
Gabby, how do you sustain yourself as you are both a student and running virtual companions at the same time?
I honestly think what keeps me grounded is also music. And I also just thrive off of interacting with people and hearing people's stories, and then getting inspired and wanting to run away with an idea and see where it goes. So I'm actually performing a virtual concert this Thursday. So that will be.
Can you put the link in the chat box?
I will.
Is it a public event? This is the beauty of COVID, is people can attend things.
So you're singing or playing?
I'll be playing the cello.
Oh,
so is your organization called Virtual Companions?
Yes.
.org?
Yes.
Yeah. It's in the chat box if you need a link.
Your name is
Gabby.
Gabby?
Gabby, yes. And then I'll actually be performing for a different virtual concert series, but I will put the link in the chat.
Oh, good.
Great.
Good.
Oh, great.
All right. Paula, are we back? Oh, great. Okay, Emily, over to you.
Yes, we are back. 10 minutes goes very fast. I hope that everyone was able to at least meet a couple new people and share some ideas. We'd love to spend a few minutes, if you're able. We'd love to hear your concepts of how do we move this work forward? What are the strategies you're using to better engage youth in your work? So we open it up to the group to please share your ideas, and I'll do my best to share what some of the thoughts were. I know that I heard previous in the chat, people mentioned some great ideas, engaging youth in advisory boards, councils being sure to engage their feedback on programming. We heard a lot from people around finding shared passions. What are those topics and interest areas that really bring together people with shared interests? We heard about engaging local schools, universities, service learning programs, leveraging community gatherings, as Dr. Kitty mentioned. I saw Kate mention they're bringing people 50 plus into the classroom to learn about social issues and connect on projects. Let's see. Age-friendly universities, that came up again. In our breakout, we were reminded of the importance of looking towards well-established successful models, such as the Rotary Group. That's a great example of a place where people are coming together across the generations. We have lots of activity in the chat box. Thank you. Let me take a look here. Using art as a connector. I saw someone earlier mention that they are using theater as a common area to bring together generations. We also, just to flag, we will be capturing everything in the chat box. We know there's a lot of good content and people that I'm sure you'll want to follow up with. So we'll be capturing these chats. Did anyone have any questions? Feel free to post that as well, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that have come up. Let's see. Transition typical senior center into a true community center where intergenerational activities and programs are conducted, connecting older and younger backpackers in a mentoring program. Great. Karaoke sessions with youth presenting to seniors, creating affinity groups. Let's see. Lots of great ideas. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you. Keep the ideas coming. We'll continue to see those in the chat and share those out afterward. At this point, Paula, I will hand it over to you to close us out.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning, and a big round of applause for Eunice, Emily, and Kitty, and Gabby, and Shayna. Thank you for really inspiring and inviting and involving us. Such a stimulating conversation. One of the things at Encore Network that is really important to us is that we don't just admire the problems, but that we help move people to action. So we are going to ask you to take a quick poll. It's just a one question poll about how likely are you to apply something you learned today in your personal, volunteering, or work life. And thanks for everybody who's taking that minute to do that. We're at about 75%, so we'd like to give you a little bit more time. While you are thinking about that question, I do want to mention two exciting upcoming events. Well, actually three. Gabby has a concert, a virtual concert this Thursday where she'll be playing cello, and she's going to put that in the chat if she hasn't already. And then this Friday, continuing the music theme, Gen to Gen Jazz, creative collaboration across the generations from Encore.org, another virtual event. And there's a movie that you can watch ahead of time to kind of warm yourself up to the topic. I'm really excited about both of those. And then on March 16th, Encore Network is hosting a 2-hour workshop, virtual workshop on reframing aging in 2021. And we hope that many of you can join us in that. So we've got 88% voted. So I'm going to share this with you now. With 99% of you likely or very likely to use something you learned today. So that is terrific. Thank you for that. Eunice, anything else to add?
Nothing else to add except to just say we're so grateful that you took an hour of your Zoom fatigued life to be with us, and to have over 100 people actually show up for an event is no trivial matter. And we're just grateful to have you in this world with us. So thank you. Go out and connect with somebody older or younger than yourself in your personal life and your professional life. And we will see you at the next event.
Yeah, and thank you for 178 people taking the time to be with us this morning. So have a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.